Hi, my name is Talitha. At dinner, my billionaire husband's sister looked me in the eye and said, "You're just a leech," right in front of his entire family, and he didn't say a word. That wasn't the first betrayal, just the loudest. Before that, they erased my name from our home's deed, took my grant funding, told investors I was unstable, rewrote my legacy piece by piece as if I'd never existed. But the worst part? It wasn't the lies. It was how quietly they did it. With smiles, with family dinners, with napkins folded just so. So what did I walk out with that night? And how far did I go to make sure they'd never erase me again? Dinner at the Marsh-Lyell estate always had this strange pressure in the air, as if every chair around the table had its own rules about who deserved to sit there. The chandelier above us flickered slightly from the draft of the central air, a reminder that even in a perfectly controlled environment, something always slipped. I arrived that Friday night with my hair pulled back into a neat twist, wearing a navy sheath dress that said, "I belong here," without trying too hard. I had learned over time not to wear anything too bright. Color made me visible, and visibility was a risk. The estate sat on the far edge of Austin's West Hills, where the city's noise faded into curated silence and golf course grass. Isolde greeted me with a tight-lipped smile. "Talitha, you made it," she said, like my presence was a pleasant but unnecessary surprise. I returned her nod. Warren trailed behind me, placing his hand on the small of my back. Not lovingly, just to move me forward like he was guiding luggage through an airport. The dining room was cathedral-like in size, long polished table, 12 chairs, 2 servers standing by the doors. The family had done this dinner every quarter since before I married in. Warren's parents had passed, so Isolde took over the tradition like a CEO stepping into a founder's shoes. Each guest had a place card. Mine said Talitha in ink lighter than everyone else's. Subtle. I sat across from Isolde. She was radiant in her own manufactured way. Blonde bob in place, pearls at her throat, sipping wine as if the glass was part of her anatomy. The others, the cousins, the in-laws, the occasional guest banker, chatted politely around small bites of crab cakes and some kind of fennel salad. I nodded when people spoke to me, but mostly listened. You learn a lot from silence. Warren reached under the table and gave my hand a light squeeze. It wasn't affection. It was a signal. I'd been getting those squeezes since our first Thanksgiving together. They meant, don't react, not here, not now. Isolde spoke to me directly for the first time after the main course. "So, Talitha, how's your education thing going?" she asked, swirling her wine. "It's going well," I replied evenly. "We just onboarded 3 public schools for the beta program. Houston's next." "That's cute," she said. "Doing something for the little ones." Her tone made it sound like I was running a lemonade stand. I smiled tightly. "It's a scalable platform. We're targeting underfunded districts with infrastructure support." "Is that what the foundation was supposed to fund?" she asked. "The application you submitted?" Warren's hand tightened slightly on my knee. That squeeze again. I nodded. "Yes. It aligned with your outreach pillars." Isolde took another sip. I skimmed it. Lot of ambition. I opened my mouth, but Warren cleared his throat lightly. I closed it again. That was our code. Keep the peace. That's when it happened. Isolde set her wine down and tilted her head, her smile turning syrupy sweet, the kind that coats poison pills. "You know, Talitha," she began. "People may not say it, but some of us wonder if you married Warren because of who he is, or what he's worth. You're not exactly... legacy." The table quieted. Forks hovered mid-air. I heard one cousin gently exhale, then she said it. "You're just a leech. You married into this family for money." It took half a second for me to process the words. Another half for the sound around me to evaporate. 12 people, 14, counting the staff. Every one of them stared at me like a crack had opened in the room. I turned to Warren. He didn't meet my eyes. He just said, almost under his breath, "She didn't mean it like that." Oh, but she did. I set down my knife and fork, folded my linen napkin, not rushed, not trembling, just done. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice level, "for showing me exactly where I stand." I stood. No one said a word. I walked past the chairs, past the paintings Isolde had hand-picked to impress people who read auction catalogs for fun, past the server who subtly stepped aside, eyes averted, through the hall, into the evening air. The Texas night wasn't cold, but my arms goosebumped anyway. I didn't cry, not yet. I walked to my car, the heels of my shoes crunching against the gravel driveway that probably cost more than my high school's entire science wing. I slid into the driver's seat, inhaled once, twice, 3 times. Then I pulled my phone out of my clutch. I unlocked it, tapped twice, recording, 42 minutes. I hadn't planned to record. But something inside me, maybe the version of myself that grew up knowing how rooms like that work, had known better. I hit save, titled it, Dinner. Not because I wanted to remember it, but because someday I might need to remind them. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen of my phone like it was a loaded weapon. 42 minutes of crystal-clear audio stored neatly in my recordings folder, labeled in all caps. Dinner. I didn't want to listen to it again, but I did. Every word. You're just a leech. You married into this family for money. The silence that followed on the recording hurt just as much as it had in the moment. Not a single voice in that room had stood for me. Not even my husband's. Just the clink of silverware and Isolde's satisfied sip of Chardonnay. I hit pause and set the phone down on the nightstand, next to the lamp I hadn't turned on yet. The house was dark, quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old floors settling. Warren was still downstairs, probably nursing a glass of bourbon in his leather chair, pretending nothing unusual had happened. I lay back on the bed, eyes open, tracing the ceiling's shadows with my gaze. That night didn't break me, but it did snap something clean in half. My patience, maybe. Or the part of me still trying to earn a seat at a table where my name had never been welcome. Sleep didn't come easily, not because of rage, but because of recognition, the kind that settles in your bones. You don't lose sleep over what shocks you. You lose sleep when you realize it was never going to be different. The next morning, Warren brewed coffee like he always did. 2 mugs, one for him, one for me, with a splash of oat milk. Routine, like we hadn't left a scorched battlefield in the dining room hours ago. "You okay?" he asked, voice casual. I didn't answer right away. Just reached for the mug and held it. The warmth felt like it belonged to someone else. "I recorded the dinner," I said finally, eyes on the steam. He blinked. "What?" "I have the entire thing, your sister's words, your silence." "Talitha, come on, that's excessive. She called me a leech, Warren, in front of your family, and you didn't say a damn word." He exhaled through his nose. "She didn't mean it like that. You know how she gets." There it was, the phrase I'd heard for years. You know how she gets. "I'm done giving that woman the benefit of doubt," I said. "And I'm done letting you pretend this isn't a pattern." He looked genuinely confused. That scared me more than if he'd been angry. "You think she's been sabotaging you?" he asked, as if the idea had just occurred. "Not think, no." He shook his head. "Isolde would never—" I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Would never sabotage me? Or would never get caught?" His face fell. "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I added. "Not yet, but I'm asking you to stop pretending you don't see what she's doing." He didn't answer, just sipped his coffee and looked out the kitchen window. Later that afternoon, while Warren was out on a work call, I pulled out the folder where I kept foundation correspondence. I hadn't looked through it in weeks. What was the point when they never responded? But something nudged me, like a pebble in my shoe. I needed to revisit what I had tried to forget. Emails, copies of proposals, notes from meetings. But one thing caught my eye, the schedule from the last foundation board meeting. I remembered that meeting well, a week before the dinner. I had sat at the end of the long conference table. Everyone else had a printed packet in front of them. Mine had been forgotten, so I shared Warren's. I remembered glancing at the slides as they were projected. Initiatives, partnerships, donor recognition. Nowhere was my name mentioned, not in the pilot program I had helped craft, not in the school district collaboration that had originated from my contacts. Nothing. I had become a ghost in a room I used to contribute to. During that meeting, Isolde had nodded politely each time I spoke, like a teacher indulging a talkative student. And when she wrapped things up with, "We're all family here and we support each other," it had landed like glass in my mouth. I closed the folder and set it aside. That night, Warren returned from a client dinner and found me at the kitchen island reviewing my notes. "You're still thinking about this?" "No," I replied. "I'm preparing." He tilted his head. "For what?" "To stop being quiet," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Babe, this is getting too dramatic." "That's the problem. It only looks dramatic now because I've been silent too long." He didn't respond. Just walked to the fridge and opened it like the cold would offer a better answer. That night, lying in bed again, I stared at the ceiling like it might show me a sign, but it was just drywall and shadows. I turned to Warren's sleeping figure beside me. He wasn't my enemy, but he was the reason I hadn't fought back sooner, not because he made me stay quiet, but because I didn't want to force him to choose. Now I understood. He already had. The day after the dinner, I found myself at the kitchen table long after breakfast dishes had been cleared, the smell of brewed coffee still faint in the air. Warren had left for the office early without a word, which suited me fine. I wasn't ready for another round of "she didn't mean it" and the usual excuses that always followed Isolde's venom. Instead, I opened my laptop, connected to the foundation's shared drive, and searched for my application file. Not the public copy, but the internal one I'd submitted directly to the committee. The proposal had taken me 6 weeks to prepare: financials, impact metrics, district partnership letters. I remembered uploading it, double-checking the timestamp. But now, it was gone. I refreshed the folder. Nothing. I searched by name, then by date. Still nothing. My pulse picked up slightly. Not in panic, but alertness. That kind of steady rise in tension when you realize something's not just misplaced, it's been removed. I checked my email and opened the thread with Anna, the foundation's admin. She had acknowledged receipt 3 months ago. I clicked reply, typed 2 sentences, and sent it before I could second-guess myself. "Hi, Anna. Quick question. Do you have access to my original grant submission from March? I can't seem to find it in the system." "Thanks, Talitha." I pushed away from the table and walked over to the window. Outside, the sky was a blank stretch of gray, and the trees stood still like they were listening. I crossed my arms and waited. 20 minutes later, Anna replied, "Hi, Talitha. That's strange. I don't see the file on our side either. It may have been archived or flagged for review. I'll check with Isolde's office and get back to you." "Best." Anna flagged. That word sat heavy in my chest. What exactly would get my application flagged? By noon, I still hadn't heard back. I didn't expect to. I had seen enough to know when something was being quietly buried. I knew that kind of burial well, the kind where they hope you won't notice until it's too late to matter. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I landed on Elena Vasquez. She worked at a neighboring foundation that sometimes coordinated with ours on overlapping projects. We had met at a fundraising summit a year ago and shared the occasional lunch or email about education access. I dialed. "Talitha! Hey, long time," she answered cheerfully. "Hi, Elena. I know this is sudden, but any chance you have time for coffee today?" There was a brief pause. "Sure. Rough week?" I laughed lightly, the kind of hollow sound that fills silence when you don't want to say too much yet. "You could say that." We met at a small cafe off Congress Avenue, one of those places where they know how to froth oat milk without asking twice. I arrived first and picked a corner table facing the door. Elena showed up 5 minutes later in a navy pantsuit and a ponytail that had somehow stayed perfect despite the Austin humidity. "Okay," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "What's going on?" I didn't bother with small talk. "Elena, do you know if your foundation received any internal alerts or memos regarding me or Edbridge?" Her brow furrowed slightly. "We share internal grant vetting lists sometimes." "Why?" I hesitated, then said, "Because I think I've been blacklisted." "And I think someone made sure of it." She pulled out her tablet, logged into her work portal, and began scrolling through documents. After a minute, she clicked something, then blinked. You're not going to like this, she murmured. What is it? She turned the screen toward me. There, in plain text, was my name, Talitha Dane, listed in a confidential memo flagged internal circulation only. Under the line, reason for risk flag, it read, applicant is high risk due to unclear funding history and perceived personal conflict of interest with the Marsh-Lyell Foundation Board. Recommend deny or delay indefinitely. The memo was dated 2 months ago. Signed, Isolde Marsh. I stared at it for a long second. Then I closed my eyes. Just once. Elena's voice was gentle. I had no idea this was in circulation. We never discussed it openly. It was just there. I opened my eyes again. Can you send me a copy? I probably shouldn't. Elena. She held my gaze for a moment, then sighed and nodded. I'll forward it to your personal email. But, Talitha, this is serious. That kind of flag spreads fast. I stood from the table, gathered my purse. Thank you. She stood too. Are you okay? No, I said honestly. But I'm awake now. Back in my car, I didn't start the engine right away. I sat there, the printed copy of the memo in my hand, reading every word like it was an obituary. It didn't just block my funding, it rewrote my integrity. Isolde hadn't just opposed my grant. She had gone to the trouble of making sure no one else would touch it either. It wasn't about a proposal. It was about erasure. You didn't just erase my funding, I whispered aloud. You erased my name. I drove home on autopilot, my fingers tight around the wheel. Once inside, I bypassed the kitchen and headed straight to my home office. I unlocked the filing cabinet and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in over a year. It was labeled, in black Sharpie, Contingency. Inside were notes, receipts, archived emails, copies of my contributions to the foundation, photos of school visits, signed letters of support from district officials. Everything I had ever brought to the table they now pretended I never sat at. I slid the memo from Elena into a clear sleeve, added it to the front of the stack. Then I whispered, You started this. I'm going to finish it. I didn't say a word to Warren the next morning. I moved through the kitchen in silence, fixed my own coffee, and bypassed the conversation he tried to start about weekend plans. I wasn't interested in brunch with people who thought of me as a footnote. Instead, I opened my laptop and began compiling every legal and financial file connected to our joint investments. It was Thursday when the bank email landed in my inbox. I was reviewing a vendor contract for Edbridge when the subject line caught my eye. Confirmation of ownership change, 7120 Barton Ridge. I sat there for a few seconds, blinking at the screen, unsure if it was spam or a mistake, but it wasn't. I clicked it open, scanned the content, and reread it just to be sure. According to the letter, my name had been removed as co-owner of the house Warren and I had purchased together 5 years ago. The reason? Emergency restructuring for asset security. There was no mention of my consent, no digital signature, nothing. My heart didn't pound, not exactly. It dropped. That quiet, sinking feeling you get when you know a storm just breached your roof and there's no time to run upstairs. I immediately called our bank's private client manager, a woman named Leslie, who had once complimented my e-signature. She answered on the second ring. Talitha. How can I help today? I got an email confirming I've been removed as a co-owner of our property, I said, skipping pleasantries. I never authorized that. There was a pause. Let me pull that up. Yes, I see the file here. The request was submitted by Mr. Lyell. The documents were signed last Tuesday. Can you confirm what documents were used to make that change? Of course, I'll send over a PDF of the file, but from our end, everything appears processed and finalized. I thanked her, hung up, and within minutes the email landed. I opened the attachment, and there it was. My name, gone. Warren's signature, present. No power of attorney, no legal explanation, no consultation, just removed. By lunchtime, I was sitting in the bank's downtown branch in a glass-walled office that smelled of disinfectant and lavender air freshener. Leslie met me in person, her voice low and expression tight. I'm not supposed to say much, but off the record, this sort of thing doesn't usually happen without agreement from both parties. I gave her a tight nod. I figured. She slid a folder across the desk. This is everything, copies of what Warren submitted, plus the property update filings. I flipped through them carefully. It was all there, his request, the justification, the fast-tracked approval. Under the notes section, someone had written, "Requested expedited processing due to family restructuring." Family restructuring. I thanked her, stood, and walked out into the bright sun like nothing had happened. Back home, I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I didn't even go looking for Warren. I walked straight into my office, opened the fireproof cabinet, and pulled out the envelope where we kept our original home ownership agreement, the one we signed when we bought the place. It was in a blue folder, or it had been. Now, the folder was empty. No papers. Just a paperclip and a post-it that read, "Filed Wood Estate Docs." I checked every drawer, every envelope, even our tax records. Gone! I stood there, hands on the edge of the drawer, mind spinning through every scenario. I hadn't touched that document in years, and the only person who had access to this cabinet, other than me, was Warren. Unless someone else had reason to go looking for it. Someone who'd want to make sure no one could challenge the idea that I was never part of this home, this life. I closed the drawer gently, then walked over to my laptop and opened a browser window. By 4:15 p.m., I had scheduled a meeting with an estate attorney I trusted. I didn't plan to sue, not yet, but I was done living in a house where the walls could be taken from under me without warning. I opened a new personal bank account, transferred my emergency savings, called the school district liaison to ensure our EdBridge pilot partnership was locked in with my signature alone. Warren came home that evening with a bottle of wine like he was returning from a day at a spa. He placed it on the counter and smiled as if nothing had happened. "I thought we could do dinner in tonight," he said, like this was a normal Thursday and not the day he'd erased me from the deed to our home. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went upstairs. In the hallway, I paused by the wedding photo hanging near the study. We looked happy in it, safe. I took it down and placed it in a drawer. Then I packed a small overnight bag, not because I planned to leave that night, but because I wanted to remind myself that I could. When you build a life beside someone, you assume the floor beneath you is shared. But when they take your name off the papers, the ground shifts. It becomes theirs. You're just standing on it out of habit. I didn't plan to tell Warren what I'd done. Not right away, not after discovering he'd signed away our home behind my back. Instead, I focused on the quiet parts, setting up firewalls, shifting passwords, pulling together my contingency records. When someone erases your name from a house you helped build, you stop waiting for fairness and start preparing for fallout. 2 weeks passed without confrontation. Warren, ever the diplomat, had defaulted back to charm and domestic distraction. He talked about trying that new sushi place in East Austin, about maybe booking a weekend trip to Fredericksburg like we used to. It was almost impressive how someone could wipe you out of your own foundation and still suggest wine country like it meant something. It was during one of those quiet days that I noticed Maya hadn't responded to my last 2 emails. She wasn't just my assistant. She'd been with me since the first beta test of EdBridge, back when we were still pitching to school boards and cafeteria libraries. She knew every contract, every launch plan, every grant detail. And now she was silent. I checked her calendar. Empty. Her Slack icon showed away. My stomach didn't drop. It tightened. I texted her. "Everything okay?" No reply. By 5 p.m., I was sitting on the couch with my laptop, catching up on EdBridge updates, when I opened Instagram out of habit. And there she was, smiling in a navy blazer, arm-linked with another young woman I vaguely recognized from Isolde's PR team. The caption read, "So excited to officially join the #Women of the Legacy campaign under the incomparable Isolde Marsh. Time to elevate family-first women and rewrite the narrative." My name wasn't in the post, but I could see the subtext spelled in neon. That hashtag, #Women of the Legacy, was the title of Isolde's latest image initiative. And Maya, my Maya, had been hired into it. I closed the app and shut the laptop. Slowly. Controlled. Then I stood and walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared at the faucet for almost a minute. This wasn't about betrayal. It was about infiltration. I left the glass half full on the counter and headed upstairs. I needed air, not outside. The air out there was full of curated smiles and polite nods. I needed movement. I changed into a black turtleneck and jeans, something that felt like armor without looking like it. I grabbed my car keys and drove to a networking event I had originally planned to skip, a local fundraiser for educational equity, full of donors who liked photo booths and buzzwords. The ballroom was buzzing with chatter when I arrived. I moved through the crowd easily, smiling just enough. I didn't spot Warren, which was a relief. He hated these things anyway, said they were pretend philanthropy. Tonight I needed pretend. I needed to play along. Midway through the evening, one of the MCs queued up a slideshow presentation, Major Family Gifts in Education, this year's top contributors. The screen filled with images, logos, names, smiles. Then suddenly, our wedding gift. I knew that photo. The ribbon cutting at the Eastview campus, the plaque, the land we'd donated. Except now, under the photo, it read, "Donated by Mr. Warren Lyle, in honor of the Marsh family legacy." I felt my breath pause. That land had been mine. I had purchased it in my name, from a bonus payout the year Edbridge launched its second round. The deed had transferred to the foundation after we got married, but the check, $210,000, had come from my personal account. And now, my name wasn't even a footnote. I found Warren near the bar, chatting with a city councilman. I didn't interrupt, I waited. When he stepped away to check his phone, I approached, quietly, directly. "That land was my gift," I said. "You knew that." He didn't flinch. "Tal, it's all the same family. Don't get caught up in the credit." "I'm not caught up in credit. I'm caught up in erasure." He shrugged. "It was for the foundation. For good. Why does it matter who's listed?" I didn't respond. Not there. Not in front of flashbulbs and flutes of champagne. Instead, I walked away. 2 nights later, the email came. No subject line. Just an address I didn't recognize. The body of the message was one sentence. "You were right." Attached was a zip file. I scanned it first. Clean. Then I opened it. Dozens of PDFs. Screenshots of internal memos. Conversations between foundation executives. One email from Isolde, timestamped 6 weeks before the grant decision, read, "She doesn't reflect our values. Her brand is unstable and personal. Delay or deny." Another memo. "Her marriage gives her access. That access is dangerous if we lose narrative control." I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. I read every word. Twice. Then I forwarded the email to a secure drive and printed the top 5 documents. I clipped them together, labeled the file Stage 1, and placed it in the contingency folder. The next morning, I asked Warren to meet me at the coffee shop on South First, the one we used to go to when we were still pretending to be equals. He arrived 5 minutes late, looking distracted. "I only have half an hour," he said, sipping his overpriced latte. "That's enough," I said. I slid one of the memos across the table. He read it, blinked, then exhaled slowly. "Where did you get this?" "Anonymous source, probably someone inside. Doesn't matter. What matters is that your sister put my name on a blacklist." He looked up at me. "You can't assume that's what she meant." "Warren," I said, quiet but sharp. "Stop. You've defended her for years. This isn't tone. This is targeted. This is strategic." He opened his mouth, closed it. "I'm not asking you to choose," I continued. "I'm telling you what's real, and I'm done waiting for validation." He looked down at the table. "She was trying to protect the family." "From me?" I asked. "From a woman who built a platform to help kids read?" Silence. That night, I drove to the foundation's main office. It was closed, but I knew Isolde worked late. I'd seen her car there before. Sure enough, her silver Lexus was in the back lot. I waited outside her office door until she came out, startled but composed. "Talitha," she said, "what are you doing here?" "I came to deliver a message." She raised an eyebrow. "I don't care about your table, your name, your legacy, but if you try to undermine me again, I will respond. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you, I said. I will not whisper. She didn't say another word, just turned and walked away. Which was fine. I wasn't there for conversation. I was there for clarity. I didn't tell anyone about the conversation in Isolde's office, not even Warren. There was no point. By that stage, words weren't weapons anymore. They were just noise. And I'd stopped believing that anyone in that house could hear anything beyond their own echoes. 2 days later, I sat in the Edbridge conference room, reviewing our gala footage. The media team had sent over the final cut to be screened at the upcoming foundation event, where our partnership would be celebrated. That's what the press release said, that it was a celebration, a night of legacy and innovation, a merging of old and new. I leaned forward and pressed play. There it was, our footage, the classroom scenes, the smiling kids, the ribbon cutting in Eastview, my voice narrating, my vision executed. But the final credits told a different story. Executive producer, Isolde Marsh. My name, nowhere. I paused the video and let the silence fill the room. I didn't need to check with anyone to know what had happened. I knew how things worked in her world. Proximity equals power, and perception beats proof. Still, I called the media liaison. Oh, she said, her tone too bright. Yeah, there was a last-minute branding update. That came from Foundation PR. I submitted the creative direction, I replied. I know. I'm so sorry. I'm sure it's just a format thing. These things get tweaked. I hung up without responding. There was nothing else to say. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 8:46 a.m. I was still reviewing investor decks at home when the notification flashed. Legal correspondence. Urgent. I opened the attachment slowly, already bracing. It was a cease and desist letter, issued from the Foundation's legal team. The document claimed that Edbridge had breached intellectual property rights by using internal Marsh-Lyell materials and branded messaging without consent. According to them, my upcoming launch event represented a misuse of proprietary community relations content. Community relations content. That's what they were calling the work I'd spent 3 years building. At first, I just sat still. Then, like muscle memory, I reached for my phone and dialed the venue coordinator for our Saturday launch. We've received a legal complaint, she said before I could speak. It's formal. We can't host unless it's cleared. Even if it's false, we can't take the risk. I'm sorry. I thanked her, hung up, and exhaled slowly through my nose. By noon, I'd contacted my lawyer. I didn't scream or curse. I didn't even cry. Instead, I documented everything. Every version of every contract, every time-stamped file, every internal email proving ownership of content and footage. I compiled them into a Dropbox folder labeled Marsh v. Me. And then I made new calls. I booked a smaller venue, reached out to a list of direct investors and loyal educators, told them the gala preview was canceled, but we'd be holding a private pre-launch instead. Quiet, off-grid, but real. If they wanted flashbulbs and champagne, they could stay at the Foundation Gala. If they wanted substance, they'd show up to the backroom session in East Austin with folding chairs and cold brew coffee. Most of them chose the chairs. 3 days before the gala, I returned to the Foundation building, not for a meeting, but for a conversation that had been long overdue. Isolde's office was as polished as always. Glass, steel, curated floral arrangements that never bloomed out of season. She looked up from her desk, unsurprised. Talitha, she said, adjusting her glasses. I hope you're not here to rehash the gala details. Everything's already in final stage. I'm not here for the gala, I said. I'm here for clarity. She leaned back, hands folded. I'm listening. You had me erased, I said evenly. From the video, from the launch, from the Foundation's history. She blinked, but didn't flinch. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being exact. You're taking this far too personally. This is about public image, brand cohesion. The Foundation has a tone, a standard. Your independence doesn't align with that. You mean it doesn't align with you? Isolde's smile was thin. You married into legacy, Talitha. That doesn't mean you embody it. I stepped forward, slowly, Not to threaten, but to remove the space where she hid behind professionalism. "If you come for me again," I said, "I will not just defend, I will dismantle." Her face twitched, just slightly. "Are you threatening legal action?" "I'm promising it." She looked down at her desk. "You're not the first who thought they could go against this family." "No," I said, "but I'll be the last who needs to." I walked out of her office before she could speak again. Back in my car, I sat still for a while. No music, no calls, just the steady hum of the engine. That night, I finalized the guest list for our launch, sent confirmation emails, updated my attorney. Then I printed a new label for my contingency folder. It read, "Final Strike." The silence inside my home had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was tight, loaded, the kind of quiet that waits for something to explode. That night, after slipping the marriage license into the box marked Final Files, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed until the streetlights outside faded into the weak gray of morning, thinking about every inch of ground I'd once thought we built together. It wasn't mine anymore. It had never been. I was just allowed to walk across it, until I wasn't. By mid-morning, I sat at my attorney's office downtown, facing a wall of glass that overlooked the courthouse. Kim Nguyen was sharp, patient, and moved like someone used to cutting through rich people's drama with surgical focus. She flipped through a folder of documents I'd handed over. "This complaint is intentionally vague. The language leaves room for all kinds of misinterpretation, which is exactly the point." "So what happens now?" I asked. Kim leaned back slightly. "Because the claim's been flagged to our state finance authority, the bank has placed a temporary freeze on all accounts linked to Edbridge's grant disbursements until we provide a clean audit." I closed my eyes. Just for a moment. She continued. "You didn't do anything wrong, but this isn't about facts. It's about optics. They want you stalled." "The foundation?" I asked, already knowing. She nodded. "Technically, the complaint came from an LLC registered in Nevada, but the attorney who submitted it used to work for Marsh Lyle. This wasn't random." I sat there, breathing through my nose, fingers steepled beneath my chin. I wasn't angry, not yet, just deeply, deeply done. "Freeze my money," I said. "Fine, but I'll use the time." Kim smiled, half impressed. "What do you want to do next?" "I want to move faster than they think I can." By the time I walked back into my house that evening, the front hallway felt different. I could smell Warren's cologne before I saw him. He always sprayed too much when he needed courage. He was sitting at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled, whiskey in hand. "We need to talk," he said, without looking up. I set my keys down calmly. "Then talk." He stood, took a breath. "You're tearing everything apart. The family, the foundation, our name. I know you think Isolde is out to get you." "I don't think it," I interrupted. "I know it." His voice didn't raise, but it turned colder. "You can't keep pushing like this. If you keep this up—" He paused, like he needed air to say the next words. "I'll file for divorce." There it was, delivered like a threat. As if I hadn't already watched him let me rot in silence for years while his sister rewrote the script of my life. I studied him, not like a lover, like a stranger I used to know. "You'd divorce your wife to protect your sister's lie?" I asked. "She's not perfect," he said quickly, "but this isn't black and white. It's complicated." "No, Warren, it's not. You stood there when she called me a leech. You stood there when she deleted my name from my work. You stood there while she shredded my reputation. One document at a time. And you didn't blink. I was trying to keep the peace. You were trying to stay comfortable." He didn't respond. That night, after he fell asleep in the guest room, I didn't ask him to go there, but he did. I quietly packed 2 suitcases, essentials only, clothes, documents, a few keepsakes. I left the jewelry he'd given me. I didn't want the weight of things that no longer meant anything. I checked into a small boutique hotel off South Lamar, the kind with exposed brick walls and a coffee shop in the lobby. No paparazzi, no gala guests, just quiet. The next morning, I moved my remaining personal funds into a newly formed LLC. Not Edbridge. Something separate. Something that couldn't be touched without notice. I sent Kim the entire Marsh VME file, every memo, every email, every photo from my camera roll showing the build of Edbridge from day one. Then I made one more move. I booked a press interview with an independent journalist who covered women in tech and nonprofit disruption, someone who wasn't part of the usual PR circuit, someone who knew how to tell the truth without hiding behind anonymous sources. When she picked up my call, she didn't hesitate. "I've been following your story," she said. "I just didn't know when you'd be ready to talk." "I'm ready now." She set the interview for 2 days before the gala. Enough time to publish. Not enough time for the foundation to spin it. That night, back at the hotel, I poured myself a glass of red wine, pulled the old wedding photo from my bag, and stared at it one last time. We looked happy, but even in the photo, I could see it now. I was leaning in. He wasn't. I slipped the picture into an envelope labeled Past Lives and placed it at the bottom of my suitcase. Before bed, I checked my email. Kim had replied with one sentence. "Everything is in place." The final detail came the next morning when I pulled the marriage license down from its frame in my old home office. I didn't tear it, I didn't burn it. I simply folded it twice, slid it into a folder, and placed it gently into the final files box. He thought he could scare me into staying, but he forgot. I had already left the night he let them call me a leech and said nothing. The evening air wrapped around me like velvet as I stepped out of the car. The gala venue stood lit against the night sky, all white columns and glowing lanterns, like something out of a southern political drama. I could hear music pulsing faintly from inside, jazz, slick and ornamental. I adjusted the red silk dress I'd chosen for tonight. It wasn't just elegant, it was deliberate, power stitched into fabric. I had worn navy to blend in, black to disappear. But tonight I was there to be seen. I wasn't on the guest list. I hadn't RSVP'd. I hadn't been invited, but I didn't need permission. I was no longer the woman who asked. The valet nodded when I passed. I saw 2 foundation interns whisper to each other by the flower wall and dart their eyes away the moment I looked at them. People inside the Marsh-Lyle orbit knew who I was, knew what had happened, and they'd been trained, directly or indirectly, to pretend not to. Inside, the ballroom was packed. 300 people in tailored suits and cocktail dresses, sipping champagne beneath chandeliers, the kind of room that existed more for appearances than outcomes. My heels clicked deliberately across the marble floor as I entered. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Isolde stood on the far end of the room in a sequined green gown, her smile frozen as she noticed me. Security glanced at me once, then looked away. No one stopped me. I weaved through the crowd, calm, anchored in my own momentum. People made room for me without being asked. Funny how power shifts when you stop waiting for them to name you. Warren was already at the podium, giving a speech. His voice echoed lightly through the room's audio system, smooth and scripted. "We're here tonight not only to honor our past, but to celebrate our future. A future where the Marsh-Lyle Foundation continues to lead with legacy, with purpose, and with family." He paused to let the applause land. That's when I stepped forward. I didn't rush. I didn't interrupt with a shout or spectacle. I walked directly to the stage, climbed the steps, and reached for the second microphone placed just behind him. The audience hushed in a collective gasp. Warren turned. "Talitha." "I'll take it from here," I said. He hesitated, but stepped back. I looked out over the room, familiar faces, curious eyes, a few tense smiles that wanted to disappear behind wine glasses. "If this foundation stands for integrity," I began, "let's test that tonight, with the truth." I tapped the screen remote in my hand. The large projection behind me came to life. The first image, a screenshot of an internal memo from Isolde, dated 6 months ago. "She does not reflect our values. Her marriage grants dangerous access. Delay or deny." I clicked again. Another email, another signature, a timestamp, a redacted conversation where I was referred to as a risk disguised as family. People gasped. Some whispered. I continued. Over the past 3 years, I submitted 7 grant proposals, all denied or ignored. Meanwhile, Projects with lower community impact and weaker financials were approved. Why? Another click. Slide. The property transfer documents where my name had been removed from the Eastview donation. Credit reassigned to Warren Lyle. The final slide. A still image of the gala video credits. Executive producer, Isolde Marsh. My name erased from every corner. I looked out at them, steady. You called me a leech. You stood silent when that label was said aloud in your dining room. But let me be clear. I didn't come for your table. I built my own. I came tonight because the people you manipulate deserve to know where the money goes, who shapes the narrative, and who's been rewriting history in real time. Isolde stepped forward now, her voice cold. This is slander. No, I replied. This is evidence. The crowd murmured again. A few people clapped. Others looked around like they were waiting for someone to tell them how to react. From the back of the room, one of the foundation board members raised their hand. I move to call an emergency vote, she said, per bylaws. Isolde froze. The board gathered quickly. 5 members huddled near the catering table, whispers flying. Minutes passed. I didn't leave the stage. Finally, one of them returned to the mic. Effective immediately, he announced. Isolde Marsh is relieved of her duties as foundation director. The vote was unanimous. The ballroom went silent, like someone had pulled the plug on the event's electricity. Isolde didn't speak. She turned, jaw tight, and walked out without another word. I stood there a moment longer. Then slowly, I stepped down from the stage. They clapped, not for revenge, but for the truth. And I walked off that stage knowing I would never sit at their table again, because I had built my own. The next morning, I woke to a clear sky and the quiet hum of a city that no longer intimidated me. I had slept without dreams, without interruptions, the kind of sleep that only comes when a long-held weight finally leaves your body, the kind that whispers, "You did it," not because someone said so, but because you finally knew it yourself. 6 months had passed since the gala. 6 months since I walked off that stage without looking back, without needing anyone to follow. And they didn't. Not right away, at least. But the world did what it always does when a lie is exposed. It watched. Quietly at first. Then, all at once. Edbridge had grown, not in volume, but in value. We expanded into 3 new school districts. Our retention rate spiked. Parents emailed with stories about kids reading for the first time without crying. Teachers sent handwritten thank you notes. Not because I was someone's wife or someone's daughter-in-law, but because what we built actually worked. That morning, I took a detour before heading into the office. The cemetery gates were already open, the security guard nodding me through. I parked near the shade of the oldest oaks and walked up the gentle hill to Warren's grandfather's plot. The headstone was simple, dignified, the way he was before all the noise. I pulled the letter from my purse, the one Kim had given me after the board vote. It had been tucked inside one of his old foundation files, sealed, handwritten, and dated 2 months before he passed. I opened it again, just as I had the night I found it. Talitha, I don't know what they've done or said to you, but I've seen the hours. I've seen the results. And you were never part of this family to elevate us. You were part of it because you elevated yourself. That scared them. I hope you never shrink just to fit their mold. I see you. I saw you first. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it inside my journal under a tab labeled Truths They Never Wanted to Say Aloud. Then I stood quietly for a moment, placing my hand gently on the top of the stone. Thank you, I said. By noon, I was back at the new Edbridge headquarters, an airy, sun-drenched space in downtown Austin with windows that stretched from floor to ceiling and a reception desk made of reclaimed wood from our first prototype school. Our launch press conference was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. At 1:55, I stood behind the stage curtain, adjusting the mic clipped to my collar. I could hear the room filling, educators, journalists, students, faces that hadn't been in the gala crowd. Faces that weren't impressed by last names or marble staircases. This time, no one was introducing me. There was no family title, no nod from the foundation, just my name and my work. I stepped out. The lights weren't blinding, the applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Behind me, a large banner displayed the new Edbridge Initiative, National Learning Equity Initiative, powered by Talitha Dane. No hyphens, no shared credit, just me. Later that week, the Austin Chronicle ran a headline that caught me off guard. The woman they called a leech now employs the ones who tried to starve her. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was harsh, but because it was true. On Friday evening, I found myself on the rooftop of our building, a glass of sparkling water in hand, watching the sun dip low over the skyline. The city glowed in amber and soft lavender. Traffic hummed below, distant and unbothered. I leaned against the railing and let the quiet settle around me. Somewhere, Warren had moved into a condo across town. We hadn't spoken since the gala, except for one call he made after the article dropped. He asked to meet. No agenda, no manipulation, just to talk. I agreed. We met at a neutral cafe. He looked smaller, not physically, but in presence, as if the version of him that existed with his sister's shadow behind him had finally crumbled. He apologized. No excuses, no, but you have to understand. I chose comfort, he said. I chose them. I nodded. I forgive you, I told him. His eyes welled, but he didn't beg, didn't ask for another chance. Are you coming back? He asked. No, I said simply, but I wish you peace. He left quietly, and I meant what I said. Back on the rooftop, the air shifted cooler. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders and looked up at the first star flickering into the sky. Some wounds don't need healing, they need space. They need to stay visible long enough to remind you what you survived. I didn't win by being louder. I won by becoming undeniable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and never look back. This wasn't just a story about revenge. It was about reclaiming space that was never freely given and choosing dignity over approval. Have you ever had to fight for your place in a family that never wanted to see you win? Share your story in the comments. We read every one. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more real, raw family stories just like this.